So you want to improve your communication skills, but you don't know exactly where to start. If you asked me what the most important communication skill was, I would say listening, but that would miss a lot of what's important about communication. I had to actually ask myself this question as I prepared to teach a course at Northwestern this quarter about communication skills. And these are the 9 skills I chose to focus on. 9 key communication skills you could focus on to make yourself a well-rounded and excellent communicator. The first is small talk. And I think small talk gets a really bad rap and has the wrong name. It shouldn't be called small talk. Even though it's about what seem to be superficial and trivial things like the weather and current events and sports and things like that, it's actually critically important because small talk is not about the information you're sharing between one another. It's about the relationship you're building. Small talk is a social lubricant. It paves the way to deeper communication, to deeper relationships. And the main purpose of small talk is to prove to other people that you are a good and decent person, you are a safe person to communicate with, and you share some basic set of values. So you can't bypass small talk thinking it's only trivial. It's about making sure you're a safe person to communicate. And that's critical information, especially with someone you're just meeting. The second communication skill is indirectness, or how to be indirect. Communication scholars have discovered that the vast majority of what we communicate is not explicitly communicated in what we say. Instead, we say one thing by saying something else. Another way of thinking about this is most of what we communicate is communicated indirectly, meaning the other person makes inferences about what we mean, and what we say is only part of what they take into account. So what we say is a clue, and the listener's job is to discover what our meaning or our intention is. And they can only discover that by using everything they know about you, about common sense, about the way the world works, about your past conversations, about what's normal and typical. And people take what you say plus all of that other general knowledge, and they make inferences about what you really must mean. So learning to be indirect is a critical communication skill. It allows us to say one thing by saying something else. And this isn't deceptive. This isn't manipulative. I guess it can be deceptive and it can be manipulative, but most of the time it isn't. It's just efficient. If we had to literally say everything we mean, communication would bog down in all sorts of unnecessary details. You know how when you know someone really, really well, they don't have to say anything. They can just give you a little bit of a look and you know exactly what they mean. That's an extreme form of indirect communication. But often, in ordinary communication situations, we use indirectness to say more than we mean. We can use it to be more efficient by saying just a little bit and conveying a lot. And we can also say things that might be difficult or embarrassing or face-threatening if they were said directly, and we can say them indirectly. People still know what we mean, but by saying them indirectly, we convey something about respect for other person's feelings and rights and their personal dignity. The third topic, the third communication skill is tactical empathy. This is a set of skills I learned from FBI hostage negotiator Chris Voss and his great book, Never Split the Difference. Tactical empathy is the use of a small set of active listening skills in order to be effective, especially in high-stakes negotiation situations like hostage negotiations, which most of us are never going to be in, but in lots of just high-stakes, difficult conversations. They involve naming feelings, mirroring feelings, paraphrasing, summarizing, the use of silence, and a variety of other techniques. But these techniques are absolutely essential in a wide variety of difficult conversations where we need to be really good listeners and where the outcome depends more on how well we listen than on how well we talk. So tactical empathy, fantastic set of skills. The fourth skill is how to comfort someone. One of the most common situations we confront in a friendship or other kind of personal relationship is a person comes to us to talk about their troubles. And in those situations, the goal is to comfort them. And a lot of people have a bad theory of comforting and a bad idea about how comforting works. And that bad idea is normally something like, I want to cheer them up, or I want to make them feel differently than how they're feeling. But that's not really how comforting works. The modern theory of comforting says that the way people actually feel comforted is when we invite them to elaborate on their feelings, and when we encourage them to reappraise or reframe or think about their situation in a different way. And again, we do this with certain kinds of listening skills. Comforting is much more about listening than it is about talking, although it overlaps a lot with tactical empathy skills, which means we name people's feelings, we invite elaboration, we express no judgment, we tell them that their feelings are normal, we reassure them that we won't abandon them, and so on. So these are comforting skills. And if you master these skills, people will be drawn to you because they'll think you're such a good listener. You will be such a good listener. So communication skills 3 and 4, tactical empathy and comforting, are really about listening skills. And as I said at the top of the video, I think listening is the single most important communication skill. And if you like my style of teaching, I'm developing a listening course. And if you want to see some resources related to that, check the link in the description and in the pinned comment. The 5th skill is how to offer condolences. Condolences are the things we say when someone has died to comfort or offer support to the family or the people who are grieving. Now, this is not a skill, thankfully, that we have to use every day or that we have to use that often. But it's a critical skill because the impact of these messages far exceeds the frequency of their use. So when you ask people about the most memorable messages they've ever received in their lives, it's often messages that they received in these critical situations, like when people offered really effective condolence messages to them. So although we don't have to offer condolences often, the impact of these words is tremendous. And so we want to be able to do it well. It's also just the mark of being a kind and decent person, is the ability to offer meaningful condolences when people have died. The 6th communication skill that made my list is how to apologize. The social world is a complicated place. It's full of rules and norms and expectations, and we're imperfect, meaning sometimes we will break those rules. We will violate those expectations. We'll break our promises. We might betray a friend. We say something that hurts people. We do something that hurts people. In some way, we break or transgress the moral norms that hold interaction together. And when we do, the upright and dignified and moral thing to do is apologize. What an apology does is restores the moral equilibrium of a relationship. When you transgress a moral norm, you disturb the moral equilibrium. So what I mean by the moral equilibrium is the balance of moral rights and obligations that we have to one another in the social world, especially that we have to people that we call our friends or close relations. So when we transgress a moral norm, when we lie, when we break a promise, when we betray a friend, when we do something wrong like that, when we fail to keep an obligation, then we have transgressed or broken a moral norm. And in order to restore the moral equilibrium of the relationship, we have to apologize. And most of us are not that good at apology. We weren't taught how to apologize well and completely, but learning how to do it well, which involves acknowledging the transgression, taking responsibility for it, making amends if possible, reinforcing the importance of the moral norm. These are critical skills if you want to be a competent communicator. The 7th skill is how to give constructive criticism. Now, this is important both when we're parents and in a friendship or in a close relationship, but it's especially important at work or in my job as a teacher. I often have to give students constructive criticism, or my staff or employees constructive criticism, meaning their performance has fallen somewhat short of some ideal expectation, and I need to offer feedback, and it may be critical feedback about their performance, and I need to do it in a way that preserves the relationship. This is constructive criticism, and at work, it's one of the most useful skills. It's one of the skills you're going to draw on over and over again, as you have to offer criticism to your staff or employees or colleagues, but in a way which allows them to improve and accept the criticism and preserves an ongoing relationship. It's easy to criticize people in a way that hurts their feelings and humiliates them and makes them feel small. It's harder and takes more skill to criticize people in a way that clearly communicates the problems with their performance or their behavior, and also communicates that we value them and welcome them to improve. The 8th skill is how to break bad news. Like with condolences, breaking bad news is not something that we have to do commonly, but when we have to do it, the impact of the words is tremendous, and we want to be able to do it well. This is something I learned when I went around the country for about 10 years teaching healthcare professionals how to talk to patients and families who had been harmed by healthcare. And these were often doctors and nurses and hospital administrators who had been working for a long time in those roles and maybe had broken the diagnosis of cancer to many patients. but having to tell patients and families that their family members had been injured by a medical error was very difficult. And most people are not that skilled at it. But it is a learnable set of skills. You can learn to break bad news in a way that allows people to prepare. And then you break the bad news clearly and unambiguously. And then you use your comforting and tactical empathy skills to process their emotional reaction. So breaking bad news, critically important communication skill. And the ninth and final skill I focused on in my communication skills course recently was how to regulate bad behavior. Now, this is related to giving constructive criticism, and you'll see many of the skills in these 9 particular sets of communication skills are related to one another. I'm not claiming they're all completely distinct and involve completely different skills. After all, we're still talking about communication skills, so it involves listening well, responding with tact and poise and dignity and so on. But regulating bad behavior, this means when someone has behaved badly and we're in a position where it's our responsibility to bring their behavior back into line. The classic example I use of this when I'm teaching is you're the leader of a group project and one member of your group project has been late to a couple of meetings, missed one meeting entirely, and then calls up the night before his part of the project is due and says he's not done, he needs more time. This is bad behavior. And his behavior needs to be regulated, meaning we have to bring him back into line. And like most difficult communication situations, this is difficult because it involves competing goals, multiple competing goals. Most communication situations are difficult because they involve multiple competing goals. And the regulating bad behavior kind of skill is we want to tell the person what about their behavior was wrong and how it needs to be fixed. That's directly face-threatening. It's potentially it's going to hurt their feelings. It could humiliate them and cause them to lose face. So we want to manage the relationship. That's one goal. But then there's the other goal. Tell them what they did wrong and get them to behave differently. So these two goals, directly giving them the criticism or the talking about their bad behavior and telling them it has to change, which is face-threatening. And then at the same time, maintaining the relationship. Or as they say in the book, Crucial Conversations, how to tell the truth and keep your friends. So regulating bad behavior, another critical communication skill. So that's it. 9 communication skills that when I had to prioritize them, these are the ones I picked. It doesn't mean there aren't other important communication skills. Of course, there are. But I think if you master these 9, you'll be well on your way to being a truly excellent communicator. If you like my style of teaching, look down in the comments. You'll see a link to some resources that are available, and I hope you'll check those out. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.